because I'm not. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Barr Moses, the CEO and co-founder of Monte Carlo Data. Good afternoon, Barr.
Hi, Mark. So great to be here.
Well, I'm glad you could join us today. So to start with, can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Israel. My dad is actually a physics professor, and my mom is a meditation teacher.
Wow.
So got a taste of both worlds growing up. Yeah, exactly. I always loved math and stats. Actually started my career in the Israeli intelligence or Israeli Air Force as a commander of a data unit. And shortly after that, actually backpacked in South America for a year, which was a lot of fun. And then came over to Stanford to study math and computational sciences. Thought that I was going to stay in academia for a little bit there, but ended up taking a different route and actually joining Bain & Company, where I worked mostly with kind of tech companies on their strategy and data and operations. Learned a lot, and then joined Gainsight, which is a customer data platform focused on helping companies leverage data as a competitive advantage. Joined Gainsight and became VP of customer operations there. Was very fortunate to work with a number of different teams, among them the data and analytics team. We basically sort of had kind of our own, we were using our platform internally as well. And so we actually called it Gainsight on Gainsight, or GONG for short. And so, we actually could test out a lot of different approaches to data and to analytics. And some of the problems that we're working on today, actually initially I started out from experiencing them at Gainsight. And inspired by wanting to help data teams make their lives a little bit easier, decided to start Monte Carlo. And so here we are today. Started in early 2019. Yeah, we have an awesome team today, and happy to share more about that as well.
All right, great. And very interesting background. And just out of curiosity, since you have Israeli military background, that's unusual. Are you versed in Krav Maga?
Great question. I actually sucked at Krav Maga. To be honest, I was the person that they, wouldn't send to go do the exercises because I was pretty bad at it. I had other strengths, but not in Krav Maga.
That was not your strength. It sounds like your strength is in data and analytics, right?
Exactly. I was better, give me a pencil and a paper. I'll be stronger with that. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I do have good memories waking up, at 4:30 a.m., doing Krav Maga and other physical activities at 5 a.m. The military hours are quite intense. And so, being at 5 a.m. and getting a head start on both Krav Maga and data is something that, I enjoy doing.
That is quite a varied background. Interesting. So what has been your experience with remote employment as both an employer and an employee?
Yeah, definitely. So, I think actually my first experiences with remote work started out at several years ago. So at Gainsight. So Gainsight was in fact, kind of one of some of the pioneers of remote work. And I actually managed a team that we had folks from, across the United States, as well as India and Israel. And so really from day one, we sort of had to figure out the remote work thing back then. And I learned a ton, and, both on what works and what doesn't work. And because of that, actually, when we started Monte Carlo last year, we wanted to start as a remote first company from day one. And it was clear to me that I wanted to build the company around the best people that we can find and not the other way around. And that meant finding the people where we want, finding the best people where we can, and then helping set them up for success. So really from day one, we've done that. And I think today at Monte Carlo, a lot of sort of the processes and the best practices for remote work are ingrained with us. And I'm really happy about that. And, we're going to use that as an advantage as we grow as well.
Very interesting. So I assume you have employees all over the US and other parts of the world?
Yes, that's right. We have both employees and customers actually, all over the world. We have customers that are, shipping things over to us, and we ship things over to them from day one, and same with employees. And so we actually have a 24/7 model, both in terms of how we work with our customers and our employees from day one.
Oh, very interesting. So what do you think is the future of remote employment? I would assume you're positive towards it. And what do you think can be done differently to make it more effective?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think, well, first of all, honestly, with COVID-19 and everything that's going on the West Coast right now as well, remote work is our reality, right? And so the faster that we get accustomed to it, the better, right? You can't pretend like it's not here.
Right.
And I think in a way, some aspects of this will always stay. And I think we have to figure out, how do we both maintain the positive aspects that we had in being in person with people. I personally, I really miss seeing people and I miss seeing people in person, and it's hard, right? So we have to figure out, how do we both incorporate all the great stuff that comes with remote and still create a strong culture? And I actually think we can do that. There's various creative ways that we can do that. For example, actually having kind of like different hubs, so to speak. So basically creating areas where folks feel comfortable being part of a remote company, but also having local sort of things and people and communities that help them feel connected. So for example, when we hire in a new remote location, I always think about, what is our potential for hiring additional people in that area? Like how much more talent can we grow there? What's the infrastructure for that? How do we set up people there in the best way in terms of mentorship and access to resources and learning and all that good stuff? And so whenever we hire a new person in a new location, I want to make sure that I'm setting them up for long-term success. And so, I'd like to balance both of those. So I think it's important for us to continue to have, a great sort of remote culture, but also support people locally. And a lot of that actually, with companies like Gaper, becomes even easier, right, if you have the right support in place as well.
And so has Monte Carlo ever actually had an office, or has it always been 100% remote?
We've always been 100% remote. We've used different locations. So we've you sort of rented out kind of local areas, but from day one, we did not have a headquarter, and we really, have a remote first philosophy.
Very interesting. So what is the story behind Monte Carlo Data? First of all, can you explain the name? That's one interesting thing, and the product and who your, target audience is.
Yeah, definitely. So we're named, Monte Carlo is actually a simulation. When I was working with statistics and math, and so actually we're named after the simulation, not the location. And though we plan to open an office one day in Monte Carlo as well. I'll let you know when that happens. And so, that's where the name comes from. In terms of the company itself, we're a data reliability company, which means that we work with enterprises to help them increase trust in their data and reduce data downtime. And so what does that actually mean? Data downtime is periods of time when your data is wrong, basically, when there's bad data. And, we talked about this a little bit before, but, I think, a decade ago, maybe 10, 20 years ago, people weren't using data that much, right? And so we could kind of get by with sort of manual processes to address the problem of bad data quality, data governance. And I think in a way, the data industry is really, really interesting in the last decade. Like if you look at it, we've made tremendous progress on the front of sort of AI and NLP and all that good stuff. But there's this opposite trend around the fundamentals of data, like around data accuracy and data trust and data reliability. Those areas are really lacking, and we haven't solved that problem yet. And so that's what Monte Carlo does. We actually apply AI, machine learning, and automation to help companies trust their data, to know that it's reliable, that it's accurate, to know where it's coming from, to know that it's complete. We like to call something sort of, I talked about data downtime. So I'll explain kind of where that name comes from. That actually comes from application downtime. So again, I'll take you back a couple of decades ago. If you had a website, nobody cared if your website was down because nobody was looking at your website, right?
Mhm.
Who knew what happened to your website, right? But today, that sounds ridiculous, right? Like you have all sort of, amazing tools and solutions to make sure your website is always up and running and that you don't have any application downtime. I think the same thing is happening for data. Maybe a couple years ago, you could get away with some of your data bad in some places, but it's just not going to cut it anymore. We're not going to be able to afford to have data downtime anymore. We're going to have solutions and tools and metrics and SLAs to make sure that your data has 5 nines of availability and is reliable.
Mhm.
And so that's what Monte Carlo is focused on.
Interesting. So, I mean, I didn't tell you this, but I'm actually a former DBA. I still am a DBA, actually. So I
Oh,
know
nice.
some of the stuff you do. Do you have tools that take care? I mean, usually the biggest problem with bad data is on inception, on capture. Do you have tools that take care of those things?
Yeah, great question. So I think if you break down the problem, definitely inception is one of the big problems, right? Like when you're just ingesting data, this is the whole like good data, or sorry, garbage in, garbage out,
Garbage out,
right?
yeah.
Right? So you want to make sure that the data you're ingesting is accurate. But let me also ask you, what about everything after that, right? Even
Right.
if you ingest data that's accurate, it could break. You have like 50 other transformations and different layers and systems down the line where you could break and go wrong, right?
Absolutely.
And so at Monte Carlo, we draw inspiration, again, going back to application downtime, we draw inspiration from solutions like New Relic and App Dynamics. What
Mm.
do those solutions do? They connect your applications wherever they are and help create observability, meaning a view into the health of your system, which is end-to-end and automated. And so our approach is the same, but for data. We connect to your data wherever it is, end-to-end, including ingestion, but also after.
Mm.
And in an automated way, we ensure that you have the visibility into the health of your system. We create sort of what we call data observability into it. So I would say, upon ingestion is necessary, but not sufficient. The problem actually needs to be solved end to end.
Right. But I think you'll agree if it's bad when it first comes in, it's going to be bad from that point on.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. For sure. I give this like example like this, it's kind of funny the way that we operate our like data infrastructure today. Just taking another example, imagine that you were running a car factory
Mhm.
and you had all these like sources. You had like sand and glass and metal and whatever else that it takes to build a car. And then you were taking all that sources and then you had like anywhere between 5 and 50 different steps to sort of use that sort of raw sources and turn them into like doors and windows and all that good stuff. And in the
Mhm.
end, you have a car. And then the only way for you to know if like the source raw material was broken or anything along the way was broken was like you take the car on like a test drive and
Mhm.
at 120 miles per hour, suddenly you learn like something breaks, right?
Mhm.
That's literally how we operate our data infrastructure today. We take some data, we work through it, we wrangle it, we do all this good stuff. And then at the end, someone tells us that the data is wrong, but that's after your company lost millions of dollars, after you lost customer trust, after you wasted your team's time, all these things happen. And then the data is wrong. How do we flip that on its head, right?
Mhm.
How do we find out the problem at the beginning of the factory, not when we're at 120 miles per hour driving the car?
Yes, I would agree with you 100%. So the current situation, everybody in the world basically had to go remote. March 16th was actually the date. It's almost 6 months to the day now.
Yeah.
You already were remote, but did that cause any problems or roadblocks that you didn't expect for both yourself and for your customers?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think it definitely was. It's definitely a very challenging time, right, for
Mm.
everyone. And so I think there was definitely some changes in terms of kind of how we support our team members. We had a lot of things that we had in place, right? And so some of those things we doubled down on them. I'll give you an example. We used to have kind of like monthly get-togethers, and we used to have them sort of locally. And so in a remote world, how do you do that, right? What do you actually do to create team culture? And so now we actually started doing all these like online experiences once a month. Like once a month, we just had this actually like class about sharks. Where, you know, as a company, we just got together and learned about that. Or we had a magician come and give us sort of a class online. That was another month. And so I'd say we're getting more and more creative in how do we create culture.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we used to do is kind of like bring your own drinks happy hour.
Yeah.
You know, so everyone hangs out. We used to do that before, and now we're doing that even more.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that is one of the big changes. And then in terms of working with customers, you know, I think for customers who like really want to work with you, we figure out how to do that, right? So again, whether it's like actually like shipping laptops over, or sending materials to them via mail. So we've definitely found creative solutions to do that. And actually, I think for a startup, there are many opportunities where this has actually leveled the playing field for us, because, you know, we obviously as a startup operate with limited resources, and so we need to get creative. And, you know, in that sense, like we can throw an online event in the same way that any large company can throw an online event.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think, you know, I'd like to see the silver lining in some of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hopefully we get back to sort of normal soon, but until then, we have to double down on what is working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So finally, you talked about this just a little bit earlier. There's companies like Gaper that actually support companies like yours, that we provide specific software skills to startups or any size company that needs them. And generally they need them in a hurry, and they want to know that they're vetted. How important do you think that'll be going forward?
Oh man, I mean, look, for us, one thing that definitely happened is that in many ways, COVID-19 has accelerated digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that actually means that people are turning to data more and more. And so
Mm-hmm.
that means sort of acceleration on our end. And so, you know, we've actually sort of tripled in size in the last quarter or so, because we've had to
Wow.
sort of grow tremendously. And that wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have, you know, sort of folks to rely on to help us grow. So I think definitely, you know, companies like Aper help companies like us accelerate our growth when we need that. So I would say, you know, definitely critical. We couldn't have done it without that support.
Very interesting. Well, Barr, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been very interesting. I know, you know, what your company does, and I know it's in demand. I know this field is growing and growing. As there's, I mean, big data is everywhere, right? And you know, we used to think a gig was a big database, and now it's like, oh, it's only a gig. Put it on a
Right.
thumb drive.
Yeah. Throw it over.
Yeah, right. Or drop it in Dropbox or something. But now, you know, now we're talking terabytes and petabytes. So I think it's just going
Yeah,
to continue to be more and more important as time goes on.
definitely. 100% agree. I think it's a very interesting time to be in data. And yeah, I can't wait to see what's next.
All right. Well, thank you again and have a great night.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Bye.
Bye.